In 2005, a young woman living in a remote farmhouse who was taking care of her ill elderly grandmother was suddenly awoken from a nap by a loud and crazed screaming after rushing to her grandmother's room. She saw her cowering under the sheets like a little girl. The young woman, whose name has not been disclosed, shook her grandmother vigorously to get her attention. When the grandmother finally regained composure, she claimed that she saw a red figure standing by the door, one that she could only describe as Satan. The grandmother stated that she has never hallucinated in her life, and that she knows what she saw was real. Under the sheets like a little girl, the young woman, whose name has not been disclosed, shook her grandmother vigorously to get her attention. When the grandmother finally regained composure, she claimed that she saw a red figure standing by the door, one that she could only describe as Satan. The grandmother stated that she has never hallucinated in her life, and that she knows what she saw was real. A 67-year-old retired teacher came to the hospital, claiming that she had visions of odd-looking faces hovering over her, but she was going crazy in laboratory tests also ruled out two common culprits of hallucination, infection, and drug interactions. In fact, the patient and her family were so concerned in the days before she came to the hospital, they asked a priest about performing an exorcism. The woman drew a picture of what she saw. The faces had large teeth, eyes and ears, and a horizontally elongated shape like a football. It was determined that the woman had a condition called Charles Bonnet syndrome. Patients with the syndrome may see small people and animals, bright moving shapes, or distorted faces. These hallucinations are purely visual. No sounds accompanied them. In 1995, a man named Tomakata had just recently lost his mother to cancer. He locked himself in his bedroom for days, completely depressed and devastated. One night, he woke up to the sound of the wooden floor cracking, as if pressure was being placed on it. He looked up and saw his mother standing by the doorway, watching him. His screams were so loud that his neighbors called the police, who were the ones who got this information off of him. Doctors found nothing wrong with him that would normally cause for hallucinations. As far as anybody knows, he has unseen her music since this happened when I was really little and I lived alone with my single mom. She always came to check on me every night when she would get up to go to the bathroom. This one night in particular, I remember waking up thinking I heard something in my closet. I looked up and my mom was at the foot of my bed giving me a playful wave. She told me to go back to sleep. She then went into my closet and pulled the door until it was just barely open, and she just stood in there poking her head through the crack of the barely open closet. I remember vividly seeing her eye peeking through the crack at me. I laughed like any little kid would do in this situation and then fell asleep moments later. When I was eating cereal the next morning, I asked my mom why she was hiding in the closet last night, and she just stopped and gave me a puzzled and concerned look. She told me she had been in the room all night. At first she assumed somebody had broken into the house, but she soon realized it was some kind of hallucination or dream. Since this experience, I have only had two other hallucinations, neither of them as vivid or as creepy as this. One, I used to be a trucker and would do a lot of late night runs. I usually had my coffee to keep me going through the night, and even then, it would still be tough this night. However, I did have my coffee, and things weren't going so well. On several occasions, I almost fell asleep behind the wheel, and I was only just barely able to save myself from completely drifting away by actually feeling the truck drifting off to the side of the road. Then just as I thought I was regaining my awareness, I saw a black figure coming up in the road right in the path of the truck. I swerved away to avoid the figure, and just barely missed it. I had to come to a complete stop to try and gather my sanity back up. I looked in the left rearview mirror. The figure was still standing in the middle of the road. I am not usually a person to confront things in any situation, but something possessed me to get out of that truck and give the person a piece of my mind. But when I got out of the truck, there was nobody there. I was seemingly the only person on this road for miles. I took off after that, and about 5 miles down the road, I pulled over and fell asleep. I think my mind was playing tricks on me that night, but I do not know why my brain would create such an eerie image. I was 133 years old. I never really had sleeping problems. I was actually a really heavy sleeper. It happened on a Saturday morning. I went to bed late the previous night. When I woke up, or kind of woke up, I couldn't move at all. The only thing I could control were my eyes, and when I moved my eyes to focus on the corner of the room, I saw the most horrifying thing I had ever witnessed in my life. There was a man probably about 8 feet tall, with a cut open mouth, dripping blood made to look like a smile, and in the man's hand was a large carving knife. My biggest fear came true as the man started hovering towards me, not walking, not even moving a single limb, just hovering over to me like a ghost. I tried to scream or move or anything, but I was paralyzed to my bed. The man reached the edge of my bed, inches away from my face, and for the first time he moved his arm up the arm with the knife, and he raised the knife up to the ceiling, and I knew what was going to happen next. I closed my eyes, the only thing I could physically do, and waited for it to happen. But as I lay there for probably 30 seconds, unharmed, I opened my eyes back up. The man was gone, and then I realized I could move. I got out of bed and ran to explain what happened to my parents. They immediately seemed to understand and explained that I had just experienced sleep paralysis. I do want to know why I hallucinated something so horrific, but the fear was genuine, and I can still remember the man's face today, being a single mother and having to work 2 jobs. I always have to hire a sitter to watch my 3-year-old son. I have a long drive from my second job, and on a few occasions, I've almost fallen asleep behind the wheel from exhaustion. There was one night that I felt myself starting to doze off, so I tried pinching myself and shaking my head and doing anything to wake myself up. There were no lights at all on this highway, which made it even worse, and then I heard a giggling sound coming from behind me. I looked in the mirror and saw my 3-year-old looking at me in the back seat. I slammed on the brakes and looked at the back seats, to find them empty. 10 seconds later, I got a phone call from the sitter telling me that he had fallen down the stairs and broke his ankle. I was fully awake after that and sped home to this day. I still believe, because of this, that mothers have some kind of sixth sense when it comes to their children. This is the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. I live in the country, but not a desolate area. I had a decent amount of neighbors that were close enough. There was still woods in all directions, though I was home alone as usual. One late night, when I heard a legit scream coming out in the woods, I went outside into my backyard with a flashlight just to take a look through the trees. This was late, and nobody was still up, and all the lights were out shining the light through the trees. I froze when the light landed on a tall figure, probably twice as tall as me, and it had some kind of long trunk hanging from its face that went down to its waist. Almost like an elephant, it was moving in some kind of creepy march in my direction. All that I could see from it was blackness. There was no color to it. I walked backwards into my house and slid the door shut, still looking in the direction of the thing, but it was gone. It completely vanished from sight. I still sincerely hope what I saw and heard was just in my head. You can see some weird things when you're retired, but the thing about this story, I was tired me, and the family were on vacation to some resort in a very rural area of Pennsylvania. To make the setting creepier, there were many young people there for me and my brothers to hang out with. It seemed like more of an adult resort. But then one day when I was walking outside of the main lodge of the resort, I for some reason looked up to a window on the second floor and saw a teenage girl looking down at me from that distance. She looked kind of cute, so I gave her a wave, but she didn't show any sign of reaction, so I just moved on. However, later that same day, I was so bored that I was sitting on the swing set at the little playground of the resort, and when I saw the same girl again. She was a little ways away from me, down past the playground close to the tree line, and she was just standing there, staring at me. Being a teenage guy, my hormones controlled my body, and so I got off the swing and began walking over to her. As I started getting closer to her, I realized she wasn't as cute as I thought she was. There was something about her face that just gave off a creepy vibe. I couldn't put my finger on it, but if I had to say, I think it would have to do with her eyes and her mouth. I'd say once I got about halfway over to her, she turned around completely and ran into the woods. And I mean, she full and ran into the woods. I stopped in my tracks, completely turned off. This girl seemed like a freaky stalker. I didn't see her the rest of our day at the resort. During the car ride home, miles and miles away from the resort, I was thinking about her, how maybe if I followed her into the woods, I could have gotten laid, even though there was something off about her face. But then what I saw next made me feel like my heart dropped into my stomach. Looking down ahead, I saw the same girl standing by the tree line on the side of the highway. As we sped past her, I saw her head turned so that she was always looking right at me, even through the tinted minivan windows. I asked my parents if they saw her, and they just responded, saw, who soon afterwards I accepted that it was all in my head, and that the girl was never even there. I can tell you from experience that sleep paralysis is the scariest thing you can go through. I was 19 at the time, and unlike most other people, I had experienced sleep paralysis 3 times in my life, but on one horrible night, it happened a 4th time. And it was much worse than any other time or anything in my life. For that matter, I opened up my eyes just as the morning sun began to peek its light into my somehow opened blinds, but I found myself unable to move it. Already a hellish experience enough, but what I saw only made it an emotionally scarring experience. There was a little girl standing by the wall staring me down. At least I assumed she was, because her eyes were nothing but black. Anyone's neutral response would be to jerk up and scream or attack, but I could undo anything. The girl then started taking giant exaggerated steps, stretching her legs more than humanly possible. She reached my bed and stopped, and finally, she threw her hands around my throat and squeezed, and I couldn't breathe. She was choking me, and in reality, I could not breathe. I thought I was going to die, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was completely helpless, and then just as I felt as if I were taking my final gasps, my hands jerked up, and I hit myself in the face. The girl was gone, and I was fully awake. I felt like I had been underwater for a whole minute, gasping for air. I had been genuinely cut off from breathing in air, but that wasn't even the scariest part. What I find the most terrifying, and you can only understand if you've experienced something like this yourself, was watching that little girl with her hands around my throat, choking me almost to death, and just sitting there, watching and feeling it, unable to do anything.